people want the scenario to be perfect for when they're buying. So if you're waiting for rates to come down so you can afford X house and it'll be cheaper, the smarter thing to do is buy the house now at this price. Questions we get this year from clients. First one, are real estate prices going to come down? What's your thoughts?
Given the low inventory rate, especially what we're seeing here in Chicagoland, in the foreseeable future, I don't see it. And obviously, Chicago is a very multi-tiered market. It depends on what product you're looking for. But I think across the board, we've been seeing inventory issues. Even right now, we're going to places and we're seeing multiple offers. Places are still going in a week. We didn't think that would happen again in 2023 with the interest rates being where it's at, but from my experience, that's what I've been seeing.
For me, I think we have to break it down into the basics, supply and demand. And I said the same thing last year. Interest rates could be 12%. If there's not enough homes, it's not enough homes. It's going to affect the price. And this is a crazy example, comparison, diamonds. Diamonds cost X amount per carat because there's not enough of them and they're very hard to obtain. If you could just find a diamond on the street, it wouldn't be worth as much as it is. So for me, I think it's all supply and demand. There's not enough inventory, like you said, and because of that, prices are staying steady. Now, the ones that have come down is because people are overpricing their homes, but when you look at it as closed sale to closed sale year over year, it's actually more than it was a year before. I definitely expected it to come down with inventory, but inventory hasn't changed. Even though there are less buyers out, there's even less inventory than the amount of buyers are out.
You hit it right in the head.
Yeah.
Less inventory. That's making a big difference right now.
I think people look at real estate as if it is, like if we're looking at clothes in a store. They say, oh, eventually these prices will come down because in 6 months or 10 months, it's gonna be a different style. Like, real estate isn't like that. Real estate is literally like a stock. Like the Apple stock in 1985 is the same stock now, it's worth a different price. So you have to understand, I think real estate is a long game. What I find it interesting is I think the mindset of a person depends on what side of the transaction they're in. As a seller, they think their home is worth more. And as a buyer, you think homes are worth less.
Yep.
So it's funny, the real estate market questions I get are based on the people I'm talking to, where everyone who I have as a seller is telling me their home is worth so much, I'm gonna sell it for more. And everyone that has a buyer says, JP, these homes aren't worth anything, I want it for less. So it all depends on where you're at in your journey. But honestly, I don't see prices coming down anytime.
And the beautiful thing is, ultimately, the market will dictate what it's worth. Whether you think it's worth it or not, you'll find out when it goes contingent or not.
I think I struggled a little bit beginning of the year with that, saying, okay, this isn't worth this much. But after a week, I was like, hey, all of these things are going on the contract immediately. I don't care what I think it's worth, the market is a determining factor.
For a lot of the buyers that sat on the sideline for 2022 and the interest rates have gone up, they're asking, will the rates go back down?
In 2022, when rates were coming down, there's no way I believe that rates would be at 3%, at 2s. I have a friend that got a 1.9. There's no way you would have thought that. Now that we've passed that, I don't see it coming back down that low again. People want the scenario to be perfect for when they're buying. Let's not say if it's coming down or not. Let's just say they do. What do you think is going to happen?
Oh, it's going to be a frenzy. We'll have a mass influx of inventory, mass influx of buyers, and it's going to get even more insane than it did in 2022.
Yeah, 2022 was nuts in the sense of how fast things were moving, how much overpaying happened, but when you look at a year past, like, well, that house was actually worth that price.
I think people forget that when you're comparing those like low interest rate environments, those were historical lows. If we're checking over a 30-year time frame at the time of this video, the average rate is still right around 7 something. We're technically below the average. So I think when people try to compare, they're not making an apples comparison when they're comparing all-time lows to what they see now. So you have to have like a perspective on it.
It's almost like comparing like different decades of a sports team. Like you cannot compare the 90s Bulls to the 2000 Bulls. They're incredibly different. Do I think rates are gonna come down? I think it would be stupid for me to say never, but I think it's highly unlikely. And even if you were waiting for it, the scenario that's gonna happen isn't gonna be favorable for you. So if you're waiting for rates to come down so you can afford X house and it'll be cheaper, the smarter thing to do is buy the house now at this price. And when rates come down in a year, refinance and you'll get last year's price with this year's rates. If you get this year's rates with this year's price, everything is going to adjust. There's no diamond in the rough. There's no perfect scenario to clients all the time. There's no deals in real estate.
Yeah.
You're giving up something. You're giving up price, you're giving up time, you're giving location. It might be a deal to one person in one scenario, but the other person is not. So like, to find your perfect scenario, it's incredibly tough. You have to make the magic in real estate. That's why you have to make it work. Out of most clients I have, I would say 99% of them, you can look back and say, I'm glad I made this purchase.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that.
The clients I have will say, man, this is a tough purchase. I would say financially probably wasn't ready and they didn't realize that, or bought a multi-family unit and didn't realize how much work goes into it. But most of my clients, like the neighbor, we have to fix a fence, this happened, this leak, but oh my God, we're so glad we have the home. The great thing about housing I like is
it's multifaceted. It's not only just price and rate. I mean, you're buying something for a long term, building long-term wealth. There's so many aspects to it, so many positives that just outside of the rate and the price.
That's great because I think everyone gets wrapped up in the rate and the price, and you don't understand the entire gamut of things you're possibly going to be getting. Tax write-offs, generational wealth, shelter, a place to live. If you got none of those things and all you had was a place to live for the next 30 years, that's a great deal. I think we don't look at every piece of the puzzle when it comes to the benefits of real estate, because looking at it short term is easy to do. The price, closing date, earnest money, it's so easy to get wrapped up in that. And I tell most clients, you're not gonna realize buying a home is stupid. It's dumb. No one wants to put 20% down. No one wants to go through and look at all these houses. No one wants to look at condo docs. It's stressful as hell. No one wants to see their bank account go from here to here. When you fast forward 3 years, you're like, wow, this is the best decision I made. You don't always get the crazy appreciation. You don't always get that. So any two things you're getting is equity and shelter. The money is going to the home and you have somewhere to live. Everything else, the market would dictate it. And just like when people bought homes in Wicker Park when it was crap for $40,000. Real estate is it's kind of like a gamble sometimes. Your friend who made $100,000 in their home, they did not map that scenario out.
No, not at all.
We made a killing. Ask them if that's what they were trying to do. Because I made money on my last home. We didn't plan that. The first week we were there was a shooting outside. We're like, oh man, this is gonna be a rough neighborhood. And we stuck around for 5 years and the house sold for $100,000 more than we bought it for. And was like, and I didn't care about any crime in the neighborhood after that. I was like, I don't care. And that's the thing, like you have to kind of go through those pieces in order to appreciate the home and understand. Like,
truly get the full value of the real estate that you bought. How has the home buyer experience differed from 2022 to now in the present 2023?
It's a little bit of the same, but different. 2022, people had to move fast. Waive an appraisal was standard. As is was standard. Some people waive inspections, which I think is scary. Mortgage contingency being waived was something that was happening too as well. And it just moves so much quicker. I felt like there was more inventory last year. The buyer had the advantage, but had to give up some of the leverage with the contingencies. It was low inventory, but it was decent inventory in comparison. You just have to move faster. I think the average buyer was a little more scared. They didn't know what the process was like. They've never done it before. And having to say, hey, waive all these things that protect you was very scary. Now this year, it's way less inventory. Rates are way higher. The buyer though, is still scared, but for a different reason. I feel like the average buyer isn't scared to like purchase the home. They're scared of what else could possibly happen. Because now that buyer sat back and watched everything happen. And they were like, oh my God, this is going on. And now they're jumping in going, wait, but I thought interest rates were lower. So like they're waiting for something to happen to this perfect scenario. I find it to being still aggressive, but it's less inventory. What's your experience?
I would say this year's buyers are definitely more calculating is how I would put it. Whereas like last year, they're excited. Everyone's talking about real estate. This year, interest rates being up, they're focusing more on monthly payments. Hey, if I'm willing to pay this at this rate, I want this house to be perfect. I want it to hit 9 out of 10 boxes. So they're more calculated, and as realtors, I think it's our job obviously to guide them there and be able to show them like, hey, if this is a house that you want, you have to go out there and get it. But it's also like bringing them back and saying, hey, this is good. Make sure you do calculate this, because you don't want to get yourself in a situation where you're in their first year and you're paying X amount more than you wanted to and you're uncomfortable. So ultimately, our job is to get you a home where you're both happy financially and you love the home.
I think sellers are the difference too as well. Sellers last year, they didn't care.
Right.
And I think this year, most sellers are willing to give the credit. Even though their home is a little bit more than it should be, I feel like asking for credit is so much easier this year. It's even written in a lot of descriptions.
Willing to cover
2-1 buy downs,
Right.
1-1 buy downs. They're willing to give credit. So even though there's less inventory and interest rates are higher, the place I went to the other day, they were giving $15,000 in credit. My client used it to do a 2-1 buy down. I was like, hey, your interest rate is a lot lower
That's
this
awesome.
year and next year until it resets. So you have the sellers willing to give more credits. Last year, you couldn't ask for the inspection to be extended.
I mean, on the seller side, is definitely where I see like a huge difference, like
Yeah.
you said, because selling last year, man, it was such an advantageous time to sell with the rates and everything. And this year, I think sellers have to, push it back to reality a little bit, knowing all this. And like you mentioned, like I see listings where sellers are letting you know what the issues are, saying, hey, there's issues in A, B, C, we're willing to do this. So it's a great time for buyers to take advantage of that, to like counter the rates.
On that note, is it a good time for sellers to sell their home still?
I would say yes. One being inventory is super low. Two, demand for buyers, I see it's still very high. Everybody wants to buy a home. They're just waiting for the right product. And three, ultimately, no matter what market we're in, somebody needs to buy. So if you have a good product right now, it's always a good time to sell, especially the spring market coming up where we're seeing an uptick again.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a motivation for buying and selling that's always going to be there. Move up buyers, bigger families,
Right.
downsizers,
Downsizers.
new jobs. Like those things are still going to happen. Whatever the economy does, it's still going to happen. With selling a home, I think last year, you could slap any price on
Yeah.
there. You could put any price on there and you'll get a few offers. I had a client, I was like, hey, this is overpriced. So
Yeah.
you put it out there, I was like, So I think this year though, because of what you said, the buyers are more calculated of what they're doing. You just can't slap any number on there. You have to tell them, here's all the things that we're working with.
Right.
Here's what we're willing to do. Here's our close date. Let us know what you want to do. I think you have to price it at market value now, because even if there's less inventory, the 5 buyers are still going to wait on the sidelines and wait for your house to come
Exactly.
down. We have a ton of clients, and 90% of them the same thought process. We almost had a deal together with a client.
Exactly.
It's like, we probably saw the house for like 3 weeks, but it was calculating. How much does it
Calculating
cost?
this.
How much
Yeah.
can they do this? Can they get this? So as a seller, great time to sell. You have to have an agent that knows what they're doing.
I think the importance comes back to the agent and like knowing market time, knowing what market price is, good staging, good photos, like all the basics just come back into play times 2.
You can't slap a lockbox on there
Right.
with crappy iPhone photos, no details on anything, no disclosures. You have to have your agent be on point. We're coming back to that time again where your agent has to be on point. There's listings I sold last year. I don't think I should have done half the things I did. It sold anyway. This year, you gotta have the video walkthrough.
Right.
You gotta have the Matterport. You gotta have high definition photos. You have to have the disclosures filled out. You have to show up to do the showing.
Right.
Because that buyer coming in is gonna have 30 questions. And if they can't get those questions answered, they think something's wrong immediately. Where last year, they had 0 questions.
Right.
I just wanna buy this house. I'll ask questions when we under contract. This year, your agent has to be on it. They have to be at the showings. They have to be able to give you feedback, and they have to know what they're doing.
You have to have an agent who can sell the home, knows the area like the
Yep.
back of their hand.
Yep.
And if you're not, I mean, you're honestly doing yourself a disservice in this market.